Welcome everyone to another of our Advivo Business Booster events. A little bit of housekeeping. It is being recorded. If you could turn your camera on so it is as interactive as possible. If you have questions to ask, please feel free to use the chat box down the bottom or raise your hand. We do have a number of questions that have already been pre-submitted. There's been some prizes donated by our two industry guest speakers. Thank you very much, which have been, because we need to be able to announce that, they're from the pre-selected questions. We have taken a little bit of liberty with the questions because there's quite a few to merge and amalgamate some of those into the questions we will ask. If you've asked a question you don't recognise it, it's because there was some others similar and they've been merged together. One other thing that is quite often asked is, why does Advivo do these events? We have two values called education and empowerment, which both apply to our staff and our clients. And these are another way to educate our clients. And we run these basically every quarter. We pick topical issues to talk about at time. And, this, is commonly called the great labour or staff shortage of 2022 is certainly topical. It affects all industries, some more than others. Childcare paying big sign-on bonuses. We're seeing advertising in windows like we had 10 years ago from all cafes, all sorts of industries. It was mentioned in the budget last night. So it does affect all industries, and it is very important to us and our clients. I know certainly from Advivo's point of view, we've been affected. That probably a little bit of a segue to one thing. This is not just about recruiting and why you recruit. It's not because you've not doing the right thing, although we're giving tips to help you in how best to retain people so you don't have to recruit. But we lose people for all sorts of reasons. And just Advivo's own point of view, we've had retirement, ill health, and two people with their partners moved away. But the lack of people not only affects your ability to service your clients effectively and deliver on your promises, but it also has a significant impact on your capacity to grow. Without more people, you may well not be able to grow. So it's a far-reaching problem for all sorts of industries and affecting businesses in all sorts of ways. We have joining us Darrin, Drew, and Kim Acworth, industry partners who will be sharing their expertise with us. So thank you, Darrin and Kim, which we'll introduce more fully in a minute. And I just really want to say thank you everyone for attending, and I'll kick on with the normal part of it. There's a little bit of disclaimer, what we're talking about. If it gets more personal questions, some of the times we can't answer it, or so there's generally we're speaking with general advice. Some particular circumstances of yours may need further exploration individually. So what we're discussing in the course of this session is all general advice only. If you want to remain anonymous, you can do as well with your questions, etc. And we will have the prize presented at the end for the winning questions, as we said. But first off, I'd like to introduce Kim Acworth from Acworth Recruitment. And Kim, I know you can introduce yourself and explain your business much better than I can. So I will flick over to you to have a quick run through about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Thanks, Leon. Well, everyone, I do know a lot of people here. There are a lot that I don't know as well. So for the benefit of those that don't know me and Acworth Recruitment, I did start Acworth Recruitment with small businesses in mind. Small business owners and managers wear so many hats. Recruitment is usually one of those hats, and it isn't something that most managers actually enjoy doing, really know what they're doing. So I've thrown out those ridiculous expensive percentage-based fees charged by traditional recruiters and replace them with flexible outsourced options where I do as little or as much as you actually want or need, and charge for my time, basically. So I am passionate about value adding to small and medium-sized businesses to actually find quality staff that they can keep.
Thanks, Kim. I'll be asking questions directed more at Kim throughout the conversation, and Chris will be talking to Darrin. Over to you, Chris.
Yep, thank you, Leon. Introducing Darrin Drew from Business 360. Business 360 are Advivo's HR and WH&S compliance partner, and I'll be asking questions of Darrin today for all things HR, but over to you, Darrin, for a quick introduction of yourself, please, if I may.
Thank you, Chris and Leon, and I hope you're gentle with me throughout the course of the day, Chris. But yes, we are very pleased to be working with Advivo around the HR and workplace health and safety space. Obviously, Advivo and their expertise looks at the ATO compliance, but obviously when we start having employees in our business, we have fair work and workplace health and safety legislation. And that's a big mountain to climb. And most small, medium businesses try to do their best and run their business as best they can, but at the end of the day, when you look at the compliance requirements, 10 out of 10, unfortunately, is the pass mark we must look at. So I suppose in a nutshell, we're workplace consultants and fair work advisors. We're really here to help get clients, probably small to medium like Kim, we'll probably operate in the 10 to 100 employee space to make sure their HR house, their workplace health and safety house is in order. That's about paperwork, I suppose, to start with, but we do like moving it then into the human element, the cultural aspect of the business, looking at performance and productivity of the business to have good solid foundations, good quality staff, a well-engaged workforce that we can then start to continue to go through our best business practice and improvement. As we go
Darrin, that almost sounds like a wrap up for the whole thing. We can say
so a lot of that will actually
55 minutes.
Thank you. So I'll keep it brief. And again, I am known to waffle on a bit. So again, Chris, you have to keep me in check, mate.
I will keep you in check, Darrin. I think you just nailed one of the key things, though, in that the minimum pass mark for the HR side of things is 10 out of 10. And it's difficult in small business to be completely across everything. It's such a complex area. But let's get into it today. We all know it's hard to find quality staff at the moment. New quality staff, sorry. A lot of us have got quality staff, which is really good, but we all know that it's difficult to find new quality staff at the current time. So retaining your staff at this point is more important than ever. Darrin, what are some of the common reasons that you're seeing across your client base for staff deciding to move on and leave their current employer?
Yeah, I might address that in two parts, I suppose. There's lots of studies being done at the moment, which is very interesting. There's a lot of facts out there and figures, but sort of disseminating it down, it sort of seems to be a traditional employee, the one that's needs to come to work Monday to Friday, they've got mortgages to pay. They're obviously looking at, career development advancement. That's sort of the one area that starts to be higher on their list. Compensation is very important. But it's interesting that uncaring and uninspiring leadership and managers is coming out in the statistics to say the reason why I'm not staying in my job is because of my managers and my bosses. And that's something that needs to be addressed. So obviously good employees work for good bosses, and one of the reasons why people stay or that they go. Meaningful work and obviously unsustainable work expectations. That seems to fit the traditionalist role. But interestingly, there's another group called the non-traditionalists, and they're really looking at this work-life balance scenario. And in essence, they're actually looking at through the life-work balance, but thinking about themselves and their families first. So they're sort of more looking for slightly different things. So they're leaving because there's not workplace flexibility. There's not the ability to work from home, have that hybrid working rate, very rigid. Money is important, but then they're coming back to their own mental health and their well-being, and obviously having a supportive management and co-workers. So it's not just about the money, it's the whole holistic approach to why people stay and why people go, which we'll tease out a little bit more.
There's two things I'll pick up on there. One of them is you often hear the phrase, people don't leave their job, they leave their manager. And I think that's very true. It certainly has rung some bells for my past experience personally. The other one is work-life balance. You've flipped that on its head and called it life-work balance. I don't know if it's a generational thing or just a sign of the times, but we're certainly seeing a lot more of that at the moment. Have you seen an increase in employees moving roles at this point in time, moving employers?
Look, I suppose from our client-based perspective, no, we're not really seeing that there's a higher than normal movement. That may have something to do with that, we've set them up well, we've got the foundations right, the cultural aspects of their business are improving. So that level of accountability culture that we've created is actually helping them hold on to staff rather than lose them. Obviously, you're going to get some natural attrition from time to time, but no, with our client base, we're not seeing it. That's why that broader study talks about things in the real world outside our sort of small microcosm. But the life-work balance is really important. It's one of those fundamentals, I suppose, that when we start to engage with our clients, is we do really want the business owner and managers to understand that workers normally work for themselves, not the employer. But that comes as quite a shock to some employers. But no, they work for me, or they work for the clients, or they work for, hang on a sec, they've got their own goals, aspirations to go for. So they're always going to be looking at how can they make their life easier for themselves and the family. And more of those now in this particular current climate, which Kim will talk to, feel that they've got the upper hand in negotiating the best outcome for themselves and their family, whether that be more money for less work or more money for no work, who knows, but ultimately they then start to dictate terms a little bit more. So whether it's generational or just situational, it'll get to play out. But there's no one size fits all on this, Chris. I'd like to probably make that point.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, Darrin. With
you hear me all right?
What are some? Sorry. Oh yes, sorry. You break up every now and then. I think it's an internet thing, but we'll power on and sing out if we need to flick across to Kim for a period. Leon, did you want to jump in there with Darrin?
Yeah,
Is there anything that you
actually, given what you're talking about there, Kim, you're at the other side, but you're out there when people are looking for people, trying to recruit for them. What are you seeing as the main reason that people need to recruit people, though? Are they leaving, or is it for business growth to support additional capacity? What's the main sort of reasons they're telling you?
Yeah, well, at the moment, to be honest, it really seems to be mostly about business growth. Every one of my clients talk to me about how busy they are and that they've grown and they've got busier post-COVID. COVID's really had an impact and a lot of change on things, for sure. Yeah, of course, there is still turnover. Staff still do leave for various reasons, but I would say, general guesstimate, it's probably around 70% or more for new growth roles within their businesses at this moment in time, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And as I said at the beginning, it's really difficult. You want to bring new clients on, but if you know you can't service them, it's a problem. So having that staff is a real issue. So, but it's great to see that growth's there at the moment. Chris.
Yeah, Leon, you mentioned earlier that we actually lost a couple of people who moved state. And we thought we were immune because we were sort of saying, oh, great, we've got a semi-dispersed workforce anyway. So we're fully set up so they can work from WA if they want to. But they were in this situation where they didn't know anybody over there. So they actually wanted the social connections from going to work. So we sort of didn't think we'd lose them, and they moved on for their own reasons. Or we like to think it was their own reasons. We hope it was. Darrin, what are some of the common tips you can give to businesses to help them with staff retention? Because there's a certain level of natural turnover which just happens regardless. Is there anything that can be done about that, do you think?
Yeah, I think there certainly can. And it probably comes back to more good habits and just one-off pieces of advice, I suppose. Sort of in HR speak, employee connection equals retention of the right staff. So how well connected are your employees to you, to their manager, to the business? So we sort of understand that once people are fairly compensated, employee retention comes down to sort of three main components, and they've got nothing to do with money. Firstly, they need to feel that the team members are valued, that there's a level of recognition there that the role that they play in the organisation. And then there's a level of transparency across the organisation that allows people to feel they're a part of something bigger. They understand where the business is going, their role in that, and more importantly, where then they can start to have some personal advancement along that same journey. So there's a future for them in the business. So that level of connection is very, very important. So when you get the culture and emotional buy-in, it requires a strong connection between the employer and the employee, obviously managers to employees, employees to employees, so we feel like we belong. And if you don't quite get that right, the relationship's just transactional. If you find people that are just leaving solely for money, that connection's being lost. And at best, It's truly transactional. They're just rocking up 38 hours a week, taking their money, not engaged, not contributing. And we call that to someone camping in their business. So be mindful. One of the takeaways today is how well connected are our employees? How often do I ask those sorts of questions?
Our business partner, Dale, who unfortunately can't be here today, he calls those type of people mercenaries within their industry, which I think is probably an aptly a suited term rather. Job satisfaction, as you say, comes from a sense of achievement and is undoubtedly linked to retention. It seems to me, when I bring on new clients, it seems I'm often astounded rather at the number of new clients that actually don't have role descriptions in place or a review process in place for their team. And you alluded to it, well, you basically said just then that it's so important. Is that important across every industry, or is it just in particular sectors? Or, I find it amazing that a lot of people don't.
It's interesting.
Are they still relevant?
Yeah, I think there's a couple aspects to that. There's a skill set of the owner of the business, and again, whether they've got the capacity to do that internally, they may have to outsource that. There's an assumption that everybody knows their role, but ultimately, we ask the employee, then more go hand on hips. Well, that's not my job. That's someone else's job to do. So if you're left to the devices of the employees, they'll work it out amongst themselves, and significant gaps will appear between certain functions in the business.
Yeah.
But you're 100% right. You really can't manage what you can't measure. So having clear documented responsibilities, outcomes, KPIs, we think they're very important within a framework. Then having some formal or informal process of, again, engaging with your staff to build that relationship to ensure that the employee and the employer is on the same page. We know what needs to be done, when it needs to be done by, and whose responsibility it is. And again, that connection, you talk about certainty in the business. It comes through those one-on-one chats. And we just can't wait till the end of the year to have a review. Even quarterly, sometimes it's too late. We strongly suggest with our clients, you should be having a fortnightly one-on-one. They just focus on what each party needs. What do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to do differently or continue, just so we can continue to refine and grow the business, and obviously talk about skill sets, attitudes, recognitions, workload management. If the employee can't feel connected or engaged, again, why should it come as a surprise when they decide to leave? I'm out of here.
It's so important, isn't it? It really is. We actually flipped to monthly some time ago, and I know myself, I had full intentions of catching up with my guys monthly, but my hot tip on that is, unless you actually schedule it in your calendar and automate it, as soon as people get busy, it's one of the first things that drops off the list. And you're spot on, Darrin. I think it's so important for the whole team just to get that. I know it's something that I can personally do better as well. So it makes some good sense. Look, I think we've probably hogged the floor for too long, so I might flick across to Leon and Kim to have a bit of a chat about the same.
Kim, they've talked a lot about what we should be doing recruiting, which to retain is ideal, but we've still said that growth or people leave for other reasons, we're going to need to call someone like you to recruit people. What are some, the key things that when we decide we need to employ someone, what should we be doing, or what should we have done?
Yeah, thanks, Leon. So one of the first things I find, is when people come to me because I'm a professional recruiter, I've got to remind them that whilst that is the case, I don't have a magic wand. The current candidate market is the current candidate market. And unfortunately, I've been doing this for over 20 years now, so showing my age well and truly, but I've never seen anything like this. It's quite honestly diabolical. The number of candidates applying for jobs, any job, any industry, is almost non-existent. It really is. So first of all, I tell my clients that I have that difficult conversation and let them know, I'm sorry, I can't just wave my magic wand and plug in the coding for my production line out the back to pop out that perfect candidate for you. So I am talking to them about things around options. They've got to look at options of what they could do to actually fill the role, and that we actually need to hedge our bets. We're gambling at the moment. Everyone's looking for the same staff. There is a bit of luck involved, like gambling, unless you know how to count cards, of course. But we need to get the cards on the table. So in a lot of cases with my clients at the moment, we're actually running 2 separate advertisements for the same role. And going out different ways at the same time, just to look at our options all at the same time. So for example, we might be running it full-time and part-time on Seek. You've got somebody doing school hours, it's better than nobody at all. Or you can look at job share for it or things like that. So I'm talking about what can you do differently with this role, be realistic. What can you do to actually get somebody in there helping you operationally? Things like at the moment, I've got a firmware developer role. Hen's tooth there. So we're running an ad for an experienced person, and then we're also running an ad for graduates as well to give them options so they just know what it is. So I talked to them about looking at the role, yes, from their operational perspective. Yes, they've got these tasks that need to be done, absolutely 100%. But also trying to talk to them around what they need to think about for it to be attractive to candidates. So put your foot on the other, in somebody else's shoes, so to speak. Where might candidates come from? What might they be looking for? What is there the potential that they could do to actually do this work and things like that. So it's really pulling it apart and looking at different options for it at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And I know you and I have had those discussions for us about part-time, full-time, and running 2 ads and the options. So that needs to be done. And I know, like, a lot of people think of our website as a sales thing, but we also updated our website to say what's the benefits of people working for us and clearly articulating that, because if someone's going to consider applying for ad, the first thing they're going to do is look at your website. So outsource to us, update our website with all of those things as well about the benefits and what we offer. Paula Bird, just sitting front and centre on my screen. The first question from someone is from you. Thank you. And if you want to add to this afterwards, I'll read the question out though. But hear a lot about businesses offering sign-up courses to attract staff. If they're a small business and don't, you roll over the page, would have a budget for this type of thing, what are your suggestions and what could be done to attract people to apply for a job you have available? And I can tell you I've got a number of childcare clients in Victoria, they're paying up to $50,000 to sign on senior educators down there. So it is a big problem, and that makes it very hard to compete. Kim, what have you got suggestions for Paula?
Look, personally, and probably my psychology background coming into play as well, I don't actually think sign-up bonuses are a great way to go about attracting long-term people to your team. If their motivation is only around that sign-on bonus, then they will be motivated to move again for the same thing. I think referral incentives to your existing staff for new employees is probably a better option. So your employees are people that you're already happy with, and hopefully surround themselves with similar people. So perhaps an incentive around something like $1,000 when a person they referred to you to work with them in the business with you starts, and then maybe an additional $1,000 once they've been there for 6 months. Something like that, I think, is probably a smarter long-term approach there with it. Yeah, so I just think trying to compete in that space is not a long-term benefit. It'll just see you blow your money, to be honest.
And as Chris and Darrin said, there's a lot of other things you'd be doing to provide other benefits that are non-financial. Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's about identifying what's important to individuals and creating employment conditions around the work hours, potentially hybrid from home, salary, and incentives to fit in with a value proposition for that person. And that changes for everyone at different points in your life, which kind of talks back with what Darren's been saying. Business owners and managers have got to start really engaging with their employees. So whether that's incoming employees and knowing what it is that would probably motivate them, and ones that are with you for now, because it's not just about dollars. Going with the one size fits all approach that's been the tradition of going, we need to pay people equally and do everything the same because, you know, that's what's fair. That's out the window now. You can have two people working, you know, in a similar job, and for one, you know, they're saving a deposit to get a deposit for their first house. So that salary and maybe overtime or hours is really important to them. But then you could have somebody else who, you know, even as the husband, for example, there might be the wife's just had the second or third kid. So there's life balance of, you know, switching off, getting home, or, you know, some hybrid home stuff to help the wife. And that is more important to them than the salary and things. So we really have to start to move forward to look at that whole employment package, conditions, and what is going to hold people, attract people to the job in the first place, and then hold them there, because it will change.
Thanks, Kim. Paula, does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. We're kind of doing all that anyway. We work virtually. Everyone works from home. We provide all the equipment. We pay above award. We offer flexibility, great team environment, events that the team can do, all that sort of thing. So I think we're ticking all the right boxes. It's just, yeah, competing with those bigger places. But it's very valid what Kim said. Like, I never thought of it in the way that, you know, if you're offering bonuses, people are just going to shop around for bonuses. And that's not the people we want anyway. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, Paul, for the question, and thanks for sharing your experience of those other things. Kim, any other sort of, you know, the word flexible's come up there quite a lot, you know, working from home, hours, etc. Any other things to add to that list at all you can think of?
Well, as we sort of touched on, what I really am seeing at the moment is COVID has really changed the landscape, where people know they can work part-time. They know they can work from home. They know that they can have hybrid. They're looking for that now. So part-time, definitely. If in the cases where we're advertising a role full-time and part-time at the same time across industries, whether it's warehouse workers, whether it's receptionists, whether it's admin, whether it's anything, when we're advertising that exact same job full-time and part-time, we're getting 3 or 4 times more people apply for the part-time role than we do the full-time role. And
another thing that I've seen, and even my son's just done this in the last week, they've changed their working conditions and asked for flexible time away from their core job to do things for a social purpose, you know, to go to work for, do some time for the Smith family or something like that at certain times of the year, or do other things like that. So people are becoming more socially conscious, and building in or giving those options to do some of those other things is something else that, you know, I could share. But I'm not sure the best way to do that, but if anyone else has got something they'd like to throw in the chat around those flexible ideas they see, we'll read them out at the end. You know, please feel free to contribute or put your hand up. We'd love to hear what else you've been seeing. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Leon. Paula, I think, can I just touch briefly on something you said, Paula? I was thinking similar, like when I'm hearing this conversation, and there's some really good stuff that's getting raised here, I'm sort of thinking, I'm ticking my box as well. I'm going, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Is, Darrin, with what you're seeing, do you think it's that the reason we're thinking that we're already doing these things, do we think like that's the majority of employers out there, or do you think that's just the people that we're associating with, because we are looking at these things to try to get that edge?
Yeah, I think it's common throughout the industry. It's whether a level of awareness is there or not. Ultimately, yeah. I think the people in the room today want to take some responsibility to continually improve their workplaces, to make it a great place to work for existing staff. You know, obviously build a culture where they can hold accountable those that need to improve in certain areas, and then obviously be a great employer that's got some good, again, good history, good credibility that they can attract workers. So, you know, there's lots of sides to this, I suppose.
It really starts with us, doesn't it?
Yeah, really does. Exactly. I think Kim sort of put it quite well. We're just in a very unique scenario where it's a employees market, not an employers market. So whenever the power balance, for want of a better word, shifts, that paradigm's new to us all. So the old ways we used to do things just don't work. And the old way we think about things just don't work. Now, do we
And if I
mindful
could
of
just,
that? We then can't, from Kim's perspective, say, so what do you guys want? Because we're now coming into a very transactional relationship up front, rather than working one that boots both of our needs long term. Sorry, Kim, you want to say something?
yeah, I was just going to jump and say, so whilst there's probably a lot of us in, I'll call it the room here, we get the hybrid, we're all doing that. What Paul is doing is absolutely exactly it. I do the same with my team. I'm sure, you know, Jane does the same with outsourced to us. But in all honesty, the conversations that I'm having with such a range of small and medium business owners when I'm doing it, the number of people are just going, no, I can't split it. I can't have it as job share, or they have to be here 8 till 5. The number of times that they're saying that and just really not willing to look at it and give things a go is massive. So there is still very, very much that strong tradition for people just not wanting to try things, and I don't know whether it's fear or things like that, but I'm actually seeing the other side of it for a significant number of businesses out there.
It's potentially bad for them, but that's good to know. Good to know that we're doing the right thing, and that you know that we actually are achieving that edge, whether it feels like it sometimes or not. Can I just quickly, you mentioned working from home and transitioning to hybrid roles. Like I said before, we did that some time ago, and I personally was surprised to learn about what the HR definition of a workplace was. And it was very eye-opening with the conversation I had with Darrin and David at the time. So, Darrin, what considerations need to be made around employees working from home or in hybrid roles? Because it seems like people just jump into it and say, oh, yeah, just start doing this, without really thinking about what impact that has on other factors.
Well, true. And I suppose 2 years ago, we were just forced everyone to work from home. So these weren't even options to consider. So I think working from home has certainly gained a level of acceptance and understanding, and it's quite common practice. However, you know, the obligations to the employer is significantly high. So while it's still mutually benefit, it comes with a lot of its own extra considerations. And you know, before we sort of looking at the operational why, you know, the first and foremost is the health and safety of our workers, you know, whether it be physical or psychological. You know, where am I asking my employers to work, and what risks can be upon them in that scenario? So when we start thinking about what we do, we've got to put that at the forefront of our mind. So from obligations from an employer's perspective, can I ensure that our workplaces are safe, whether they be in the office, out driving a truck or a vehicle, or actually working from home? So that's the first thing. And again, that's a workshop in its own right, just running that with plate.
Sorry, David just mentioned that he had something to ask as well.
David who?
David who, precisely.
David who? Which David we talking about?
There's the workplace health and safety thing and the HR thing we just spoke about. But probably the sleeping giant with this flexible work is, okay, well, everyone's doing it, but we're losing control of our workforce. And my comment is you just have to be super careful around connection and engagement. It's great having everyone working from home, but we don't have that social engagement. We're not working in teams, we're not working on projects. So I'm not connected or committed to the company at all. So yeah, beyond pay and flexible work, we do have to start looking at other things around culture, engagement teams, taking our time to actually make meetings happen or things happen. But beyond that, it's a bit like, well, how do I drive engagement connection? Is it advancement? Is it connection to teams? Is it training? It has to be about other things. So the big watch out to me is connection and engagement based on flexible work conditions. So it's a bit like saying to a kid, you like lollies, don't you? Yeah, go to the lolly shop, just eat away. Well, that's actually not good for them. We're social creatures, and working remotely in flexible work conditions is a problem. Too much of a good thing is definitely a bad thing. And you're going to make a transactional workforce and you're going to lose them. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I just wanted to let everyone, the chat box is going crazy. I can see everybody asking their questions, and we will come back to answer them towards the end. But Jane has a really good question that's kind of right for this point in the conversation. She mentioned that, you know, Darrin, you keep talking about creating connections, but do you have any, I guess, new ideas for this in terms of how do we go about creating the connections with our employees?
Well, we're human beings. We need to sit down and have a chat in some way. Now that appears to be informal, but as we talked with Chris, you actually need to have a dedicated plan to follow. Because if you, as Chris sort of alluded to, sorry, I don't have time to talk to you today, I'll get back to you. That's saying to me as an employee, you're not actually valuing me. You're not recognizing me. You don't even care about what I want to talk about. You're just too busy for me. So it's important to make sure that we've actually got a program to engage people and then a framework around that. So how often you need to meet, something you'll work on. But if you're not having a chat at least every couple of weeks to a month about your role, what you do, how's it going, how can I help, where are the roadblocks, how are you? Those sorts of conversations need to be had. So again, no time like the present to start those chats. But you should, again, once you've identified that, what I need to do to fix it, what we need to change, you need to write that down. And then that's your action plan over the next fortnight or so, and then revisit it again in 2 weeks' time. So again, how did we go? I provided you support, you've got a step. So again, there's a level of accountability on both sides, employer and employee there, because we're in it together. Does that help?
Jane, did that answer your question?
I kind of like, are you saying that the employers aren't doing or haven't done that in the past, and that's a new, since I guess with the whole hybrid working, we've got to make that extra effort to do it. Is that what you're saying now? That it, because to me it's like, I don't know, it comes second nature to me to do that. I do that all the time with my staff, but maybe it's unusual. But I'm just wondering, there must be other ways or other ideas that people have got, how we can continue to create connection for our staff, even though a lot of the time they're not connected. I know, for instance, a lot of the Vivo staff work from home. So how can, some of the ways that we can, not just about having a chat, what else could we do that really creates an emotional connection for our people?
Well, I think one of the things is, I know, because we did a lot of work on working remotely before, Jane, and I think, and you're definitely not unusual, Jane, either. But there are a lot of people that don't do anything. So I think that taking that into context is there. But we do put a lot of effort into creating social environments, doing online events, doing getting the team together for social functions and footy tipping and weekly meetings that talk about things, and people sharing their what's going on. You've got to make an effort. I think if you could put it down to three words, it is make an effort. And back to what Chris and Darrin were saying is, whatever you do, those the formal meetings, when you say you're going to do it, you've got to do it. You cannot put it off.
I think you're right about the footy tipping and things like, even though that sounds a bit sort of off the cuff, I think though we found, like, even just playing a board game every few weeks together, it's just a simple thing, but it really creates connection. It's a bit of fun, everybody's laughing, I think that has really been missing in the workplace. Every
little bit helps.
Yeah.
I must confess, I did better on the footy tipping comp than I did on the bachelorette tipping comp. But just circling back to something that you said, Darrin, if I may, that disengagement, we as employers, it's possible for us to be sending the message that we don't care, purely because we're not actively trying to reinforce the message that we do care. And that's what I mean when I said that if it slips off your radar, it's not because you don't care, it's just because everybody gets busy and bogged down. But it's so important to not slip off your radar. It's really, really important. It needs to stay there.
Well, I suppose if you're a leader, leading is about inspiration, and connection, as we spoke about. But if you can't, and again, this is just a general statement, we run a workshop which is grip self, grip team, grip task. So if you can't get yourself organised, how can you expect your team to get organised to deliver the results that you need to do?
Spot on.
So leadership starts at the top down. It's not through osmosis or consensus or telepathic concepts, you've actually got to demonstrate that you mean what you say and you say what you mean. So again, if we're going to have a one-on-one connection, it's not hard. It's 10 minutes a fortnight, Chris. You can't give me 10 minutes a fortnight. So again, and I'm looking forward to that 2-week chat so we can share ideas, concepts. I can reconnect with you. Now, whether that's via Teams or face-to-face, again, take Jane's point. Sometimes we do need to make the effort to actually go and make these connections. But just because we saw someone social doesn't mean we didn't have the need for that one-on-one. That one-on-one's got to have some structure to it. And we run, as I said, we run some workshops on this, so they're meaningful. They operate around, around the wagon wheel, if you like, of things that we need to touch on. But yes, if you can't give me the time, why am I giving you the time when someone else is actually asking you to come join them for an extra 10 grand?
Yep.
So you
Well,
had
to go to that and
just not
something to
respecting the
picking up.
relationship.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Leon.
And picking up from what Jane said, and we're looking at the screen. At the beginning, I said, can everyone please turn the camera on? One of our things with Advivo, because we do have people working remotely, we don't talk to each other on the phone. It's always by Teams, so we can actually see each other's face and talk to it, because it gives you greater connectivity and engagement. So that's one thing that a lot of people I know haven't done with working remote, but we've found it is beneficial. Please nod, Nelson, and a few other people, I can see their face on here, but I think that is, we've certainly found it from our point of view.
I think, if anyone's looking for extra conversations, there's Paul has given some ideas on the things that she does with her business, and John's made the same comments. John has also added some comments, and David as well. So there's heaps of people suggesting ideas on what they're doing in their business to kind of create those conversations. I know, Kim, you had your hand up. Was there anything you wanted to add to this?
I was just going to say quickly that, yes, whilst I agree 100% with the formal 10-minute chat scheduled in and about the work and everything like that, I actually feel that there is fantastic engagement value to have just the regular, just a chat check-in that's personal with your employees. They're not going to engage with you and be glued to your business just around doing the job and the work and that sort of stuff. It is more than that. People are looking, it's that balance for them and them feeling that it's, a place for them and everything. They need to know that you understand them and you know where you're at. So, just those regular check-ins, just as a human being and as a caring leader, that you actually want to know how they are and what's going on in their life that could be impacting on things or how you can help too. So that's going to hold them more instead there, because you're also going to understand what's going on there in case you need to be more proactive in tweaking the employment arrangements to hold on to them, and not in case they don't want to come and have that difficult conversation with you about needing a bit more flexibility or things like that. So I would just say it just needs a little bit more of that personal just chats.
So Kim, we actually talked a lot more about, because most people on here are business owners, what the employer wants, and you've just talked about some things there. Do you feel that candidates, when you're speaking to them, clearly articulate these are some of the things, or is that are they questions that you ask? These are the things that are value to me. I want this, I want that. 4-day weeks becoming a common norm. I want that. Are they clear in putting that forward through? Or because I have found sometimes that people start, then they say, a few weeks later, it'd be nice if we had this. I would have liked to have known it up front, sort of thing. How do we get that common ground at the beginning, I suppose?
Yeah, and look, humans are humans. Communication is one of the things that we do worst when we're trying to communicate, when we're liaising with other humans and being on the same page. So look, it's never going to be an exact science with that 100%. I think people are getting a bit better at it, and particularly again in this market where it is a candidate market, they are happy to put their foot forward and say, no, I don't want full-time, I want part-time, or I want hybrid. So I am seeing that a lot more, 100%. But also, I guess as part of the professional recruitment hack that I have is we know to ask a lot of those questions up front. Why have you applied for this job? And if it is a part-time job, what does part-time mean for you? What are the work hours you're looking for? What does that mean? If we're talking about, you know, that we know a client's got the flexibility that there could be some work from home, we'll say there is some work from home flexibility. What does that look like to you? What are you wanting for with that? Do you have an appropriate home office and things? So it is asking the questions up front to try and get that up front for sure, but still not always an exact science, I suppose.
Yeah. And that thing of part-time, like I think there's a question here that raised on that, but I think getting, you said, you better have someone school hours and no hours at all. You know, the candidate knows what they want part-time for, but do you see any other benefits from employers in the use of part-timers as opposed to full-time?
Yeah, look, absolutely, 100%. If you think about it, you have a full-time employee doing your reception admin role or something like that. Let's just say something along those lines. If that full-time employee is sick and they've got the flu or they've got COVID or something and they're not coming to work for a week, you don't have anybody in there for that job for a week. If you've got that as a job share role where somebody's doing 2 days and somebody doing 3 days, then you lose somebody for 2 or 3 days. You still at least have capacity there for part of the role that you didn't have before. Same as when they go on annual leave. Also, that other job share person might be willing to just work an extra shift or 2 or even a half day in addition on the odd occasion. So it actually can create a lot more resilience in your workforce. Also, in a lot of times, who hasn't had when you're doing recruitment for someone and you've got 2 or 3 candidates when you just want to pick and choose the aspects from those candidates and have it all in the one candidate, then you've got the perfect one. You also got some advantages in that and getting the best attributes in different people and bringing that into a role there with it. Also, again, people are looking for that part-time for a reason, and it varies for them. If they're then in a part-time role, they're often going to be happy to do it at a better rate of pay for you because it's got benefit for them as well. So the benefits are not just pay for them, it's the work hours. And they often work a lot more productively and hard because they've still got a fear that you're going to want to turn it into a full-time role at some stage. So they want to make sure they're productive to make sure that they get to keep the job part-time and things as well. So yeah, personally, I think there's still a lot of benefits in considering, part-time and job share and things like that as well.
I just wanted to also mention that we've only got 10 minutes left at the event. It's been going fantastically. So Leon or Chris, do you just want to make sure there's another question from Jane and a question from Lee that was submitted prior to this event? Can we just make sure that we cover those? And then we have a couple of questions in the chat as well that we probably need to go through as well.
I was just about to do that very thing. Thank you, Natasha. Actually, I'll just point out as well, David Reed, thank you for jumping in before. For those who don't know, David Reed is Darrin's partner at Business 360. So he's not just a yellow from the corner having his 2 cents worth. He actually knows what he's talking about. All right, so there's a question here, and also as you said, Natasha, the chat box, there's some really good questions in there. So we'll try to get through these quickly and get to some of those questions because there's some good points and questions to cover off. Question from Jane Tui to us. If somebody wants to leave, and we may have touched on this briefly, but if somebody wants to leave, what is a good question to ask to provide insight into whether there's even a possibility that you may be able to convince them to stay? Is there a trick that you can share with us? No pressure.
That came across a little bit harsh, and I apologise up front, but we have to convince somebody to stay. The relationship a lot of thought processes have gone through to lead them up to the decision to leave. And once they've made that, they probably, now obviously you would try to have that one-on-one chat, of course, and try to identify that. And maybe a way of bringing it back, but I would tend to think that's more of a disconnect that led to that outcome. So trying to reconnect when someone's decided to leave or even may have another job to go to that's going to earn more money, again, that's a conversation that probably is a few weeks too late.
That's not harsh at all. I think that's a really good point to make. If it's at that point, it's almost too late. Yeah, very good point. Jane, does that answer your, sorry, at the risk of being harsh, Jane, does that answer your question?
Oh, I don't think it's harsh. I think sometimes people sometimes say they're going to leave to test the waters as well, to see how you're going to respond and whether that does happen. And if you respond in the right way and say, apologize for your part in them coming to that point, and I think it can, but you can bring them back. As long as you listen. It's all about active listening, really listening to what the reason is that they got to that point. And then, because I think all relationships can be solved through really listening personally.
And sometimes you get caught napping. As you said, Kim, people are human. Sometimes you just get caught napping, which isn't a good thing, but it does happen from time to time. And recognizing that is probably part of the challenge. Another question for you, Darrin. This one's from Lee at Lee's Complete Office Management. And this one may be a doozy, but I'll throw it out there anyway. What is the full process if you have to let go of a full-time employee who is not suited for that role?
Great question, Lee. And one I really want to thank you for throwing it out there, because it really highlights that it's just not a one sentence answer, unfortunately. To let somebody go because they're not quite fitting the role can take days, sometimes even weeks to go through that process. And there's lots of left hand and right hand turns to take along the way. We have a guide on all of this. So what I might do is probably send that to Lee and welcome a conversation with her so I could actually talk her through the actual steps that need to be done. But it's a really good question to ask, because it makes elevate the awareness that Fair Work has some very strict rules around this, and procedural fairness is one of those things. And we just can't take the human to human road. So, you know what, it's not quite working, you're not quite suited, I think it's best that you look for another job. We can't say things like that. We actually have to go through quite a structured consultation, performance management process, lots of documentation, lots of opportunities for feedback and improvements and what have you. So sorry I can't answer it in a sentence or two, but it's really important, because at the moment there are certainly employees in the workforce that are checking out, that they aren't suited for the roles, but employers are saying somebody is better than nobody in that role. But it does get to a point when the straw breaks the camel's back and you have to act. Unfortunately, we should have been acting a few weeks prior with the right processes in place to make that exit a compliant one that would minimize the risk of a unfair dismissal or discrimination. So David wants to make a comment here, which we would welcome. David Reed.
Look, just if there was something you wanted to say, David, by all means jump in. Look, like you said, Darrin, it's a 10 out of 10 pass. Like there is no, there's no scope to get it wrong, basically. Otherwise, you're up a certain creek.
Yeah, my understanding was moving someone on. It's context driven. Is it performance? Is it conduct? Is it during probation? Do you actually have probation? Probation isn't part of the award system. It's hard to give specific advice, but basically a probationary period is a trial period for an employee. For most companies, 6 months, where you assess their performance ahead of the 6 months. I've just put in the chat. You have to ask $1 million question when someone's leaving. It means you didn't ask it before at the appropriate time. So, yes, it seems like we're dancing around the question, but it's actually context specific. So if you actually give me a scenario, we can give you an answer. But it is it probation? We can usually short exit them out. It depends then on fit and suitability. Please, you need advice on red flags. If they've been off sick and so on and so forth, they can make a claim before the Fair Work Commission that you only sacked me because I'm sick, and it's a human rights and all that. So it's not even in probation. We just have to clear the red flags, make it about that. Don't mention the war. If it's performance or conduct, there's a shorter and longer process. Is it capacity or capability? That's a different process. So again, depending on the nature of the question.
Sorry, I'll just say what it was. I've got a client who's had an employee for quite some time, and her work is starting to drop down. I think what we've been discussing so far about connection to the employees is one of her problems. And she has got school hours, so it mustn't be around hours. her business is growing rapidly. She might feel really pressured in. It's more around customer service. So I advised really to see if she wanted to have, is there another role that she could play in that within that company? And she has had high turnover. So I'm a bit worried about her high turnover of casual staff. It is casual staff. This one isn't a long-term employee and a full-time role. So I thought, you know, you don't want to be losing your full-time employees if they've been with you for quite some time, and she needs to discuss that with her, but she's so busy. I think she needs a HR person to within the company to step in and take that role to offer her she can work in a business.
Yeah, on one hand, Lee,
I think we might have to take this one offline, guys.
Sorry, sorry.
Sorry.
That's why I made the point. I'd love to send you some information. Love to have a chat offline, Lee, where we can tease it out a little bit more and help your client, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks
guys,
so much.
There's also in the chat box, there's a lot of good comments, not questions. So we will send those out with the after event follow up. We'll capture those comments. There's some questions about a 4-day week, which I think we'll find that's probably what we talked about. The same benefits apply to working part-time, etc. So they're there, but I think Darrin would jump in and say you've got to make sure you've got your contracts in place on that. There was a question also about offering sign-on bonuses and putting some conditions around it. Again, that will come down to making sure you've got contracts to cover all of that sort of thing. That's a good suggestion about more than one way to skin a cat. Thank you, Lee. Just trying to get the questions out of here because we are running out of time.
I think they were the only two questions that I think I saw come through. Most of them were some really good comments and statements, which I think we'll try and share up in the post-event email.
Yeah, so thank you very much for those comments. Look, we're always mindful that we try and keep these on time because we all have busy lives and what we need to do. So there's thank you everyone for your input. Great to get so much feedback and interactivity through the chat line as well too, and your comments online. So thank you. As we said, the winning prize come from the questions. Kim's prize. Kim, do you want to explain what your prize is, please?
Yes, thanks, Ian. So my prize is $500 off of my fees to help with recruitment for a role for the winner.
And I can vouch for Kim's recruitment. Like we use Kim, and it's her recruitment fees, because it's not on a percentage scale, is much less than others. And she does the same, if not better job. So thank you, Kim. Thank you for that prize. We judge that as going to Paula Burgess. Thank you for the question. Not only the question was good, but the comment that went with it afterwards. So thank you, Paula.
Awesome. Thank you.
Chris, to Darrin.
Sorry, caught napping. Okay. Darrin, did you want to jump in for yours?
From memory, we were very proud to provide an employment contract review. And contracts is such an important part of the employment relationship. And a lot of people download templates or copy some from somewhere else, or someone might have a fantastic one, but we'd like to offer a compliance review of a typical employment contract that's used in an organisation. And that's sort of nominal value of $500. So we're happy to pass it on to the question that we felt warranted that, and that's you, Leanne. So again, that one about,
So Lee, that's going to say you're actually getting your question answered in person, Lee, as well with the other side. But
correct.
Lee Winter, your question that you posed earlier that was read out was the winning prize. It was so good that it can't be answered in full during the session.
Thanks so much, Darrin. Thank you.
That's okay. So looking forward to chatting offline. We'll get your contact details and I'll make contact with you. Wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll also add that we use Business 360. They review all our system processes and review them annually to make sure they're current and up to date, as well as key updates. So there's also from our website, there's a link to a landing page to ask them any questions as our valued partner that you can use as well. So I'm mindful that we are already over. Thank you, everyone involved, Natasha, Chris, and particularly Darrin and Kim, for your input, your knowledge and expertise, and the prizes you've put forward. Thank you very much for the questions, and lovely to see some faces on here I haven't seen for a while. G'day, John Huey, and many others. Thank you very much for your input, and look forward to seeing you at the next Business Booster event, which will be in February, I think it will be, and the details of that will be in the post-event follow-up. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.